The evening arrived wrapped in golden light, the kind that makes everything look like it belongs in a painting. Crystal glasses caught the sunset through floor-to-ceiling windows at the Riverside Grand Estate, where the city's wealthiest gathered for the annual Heritage Foundation auction. Nina Delgado adjusted her camera strap, trying to blend into the background as she always did. At 27, she had photographed enough high-society events to know the unspoken rules: capture the glamour, stay invisible, and never make eye contact with the guests. Tonight was especially important. This job could lead to more bookings, more money for her grandmother's medical treatments, more hope that she could keep their small apartment and not lose everything to hospital bills. Julian Ashford stood near the marble fountain, surrounded by admirers like a king holding court. At 32, he commanded attention without trying. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit tailored to precision, and his expression carried that particular coldness of someone who had never heard the word no. He was discussing a recent acquisition, his voice smooth and dismissive as he described outbidding a competitor. The people around him laughed at his casual cruelty, as if destroying someone's dreams was entertainment. Nina moved through the crowd with practiced silence, her camera capturing moments of laughter, champagne toasts, and designer gowns. She had learned to see these people as compositions rather than humans. It made the job easier, made the gap between their world and hers feel less painful. She was framing a shot of the auction display when someone bumped into her from behind. The impact sent her forward, her camera swinging on its strap, and her arm knocked into a passing waiter's tray. Everything happened in a terrible slow cascade. The tray tilted, glasses tumbled, and champagne arced through the air like a golden wave heading straight for Julian Ashford. Nina lunged forward instinctively, trying to catch the glasses, but her camera equipment tangled with Julian's arm. The champagne splashed across his suit jacket, his silk shirt, and his handmade Italian shoes. Worse, her camera lens scratched against his watch, leaving a visible mark on what she instantly recognized as a timepiece worth more than her entire year's income. The room fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every face turned toward the disaster. Nina's heart hammered against her ribs as she grabbed napkins from a nearby table. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold them. "Please, sir, I am so sorry, let me help you," she said, her voice steady despite the terror flooding through her veins. She reached toward his jacket, desperate to minimize the damage, to fix the unfixable. Julian looked down at his ruined clothing, then slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. What she saw there made her blood run cold. Not anger exactly, but something worse, a complete absence of empathy, as if she were not a person at all but simply an inconvenience to be eliminated. "Do you have any idea what you have just done?" His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more menacing. "This suit costs more than you will make in 6 months. This watch has been in my family for 3 generations. And you, with your cheap equipment and your clumsy hands, have destroyed both." Nina felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I understand, sir. I will pay for the damages. I will work out a payment plan. Please, I did not mean to." He cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Payment plan? From someone like you?" He looked her up and down, his gaze making her feel small and worthless. "Let me guess, you are struggling to make rent, probably drowning in debt, taking whatever jobs you can scrape together. And yet you dare to work events like this, bringing your poverty and incompetence into spaces where you clearly do not belong." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people whispered behind their hands, but no one stepped forward to defend her. They never did. These were Julian's people, his world, and she was just the help. But something in his words, in the casual way he reduced her entire existence to poverty and incompetence, broke something inside Nina. She had endured harsh words before, had swallowed her pride countless times to keep working, to keep surviving. But tonight, standing in this room full of people who looked through her like glass, something shifted. Nina straightened slowly. She carefully set the napkins on the table beside her and removed her camera. Her hands stopped shaking. When she spoke, her voice carried across the silent room with unexpected strength. "You are absolutely right, Mr. Ashford. I do not belong here. Not because I lack talent or value, but because I actually understand what those words mean." She met his gaze directly, her dark eyes clear and unwavering. "You see, I thought belonging meant treating others with basic human decency, regardless of what they wear or how much money they have. But clearly, I was mistaken about the membership requirements for your world." She unclipped her photography badge and placed it beside the napkins. "I apologize for the accident, Mr. Ashford. Accidents happen to everyone, rich or poor. But I will never apologize for being human. Consider this my resignation from photographing people who mistake their bank account for their worth." The shock on Julian's face was almost comical. Around them, guests stood frozen, unsure how to react to this unprecedented breach of social hierarchy. Nina did not wait for a response. She walked through the crowd with her head high, past the whispering socialites and the horrified event coordinator, and out into the cool evening air. Her hands began trembling again as she pushed through the main doors, but her steps never faltered. Behind her, Julian Ashford stood motionless in his ruined suit, surrounded by people but suddenly feeling utterly alone. An elderly woman approached him, her silver hair elegant, her eyes filled with disappointment. "That was poorly done, Julian," she said quietly. His grandmother's voice, usually warm, carried an edge of sadness. "Very poorly done indeed." Julian barely heard her. He was still staring at the doorway where Nina had disappeared, replaying her words in his mind. Mistake their bank account for their worth. No one had ever spoken to him that way. No one had ever walked away from him. And something about the quiet strength in her voice, the dignity in her departure, had cracked something in the armor he had spent years building around himself. He left the auction early, claiming he needed to change. But the truth was simpler and more disturbing. He could not shake the feeling that he had just revealed something ugly about himself, something he had always known was there but had never been forced to confront. That night, Julian could not sleep. The photograph arrived on Monday morning, slipped under Nina's apartment door with no return address. She recognized it immediately, one she had taken at the auction, just minutes before the disaster. It showed Julian Ashford laughing at something, his expression genuinely happy for perhaps the only moment that evening. Across the bottom, someone had written in elegant script, "Even monsters were once human." Nina crumpled the photo and threw it in the trash. She had more important things to worry about than cryptic messages from guilty rich people. By Wednesday, 3 clients had cancelled their contracts. By Friday, it was 7. The excuses varied: budget cuts, schedule changes, going in a different direction, but Nina knew the truth. Julian Ashford's influence reached far, and in the small world of high-end event photography, one word from him could destroy a career. She sat at her grandmother's bedside in their tiny apartment, holding her frail hand, trying not to cry. "Abuela, I am so sorry. I should have just apologized, should have stayed quiet, should have..." "Hush, mi amor," her grandmother interrupted, her voice weak but firm. "You did exactly right. Pride and dignity are not luxuries only rich people can afford. They are what make us human." "But the medical bills keep coming," Nina whispered. "And I keep losing work." Her grandmother squeezed her hand. "Then we find different work. Better work. Work that does not require you to make yourself small." The next morning, Nina walked into Mercy Children's Hospital with her camera and a simple proposal. She would photograph the young patients for free, creating portraits they could keep forever, giving them moments of joy and normalcy during their treatments. The hospital administrator, a tired-looking woman named Dr. Gomez, studied Nina's portfolio and agreed immediately. "We cannot pay you," she warned. "I know," Nina replied. "That is the point." She started that afternoon. Her first subject was a 6-year-old named Tommy, bald from chemotherapy, missing his 2 front teeth, and absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs. Nina spent an hour with him, learning about each species, listening to his theories about what really killed them, making him laugh until his whole face glowed with happiness. She photographed him wearing a homemade T-Rex costume, roaring at the camera with fierce joy. When she showed him the images on her camera screen, he started crying. "I look brave," he whispered. "You are brave," Nina told him. "And now everyone will know it." Word spread quickly through her camera screen. He started crying. "I look brave," he whispered. "You are brave," Nina told him. "And now everyone will know it." Word spread quickly through the hospital. Soon Nina was there 3 days a week, photographing children who had forgotten how to smile, teenagers facing impossible diagnoses, families desperate to hold on to memories while they still could. She created superheroes and princesses, astronauts and adventurers. She captured love and courage in every frame. The work paid nothing, but it fed something in her soul that had been starving. Julian Ashford hated hospital visits. They were mandatory for board members of Ashford Industries, part of the corporate social responsibility initiative his grandmother had insisted upon. He moved through the pediatric wing of Mercy Children's Hospital like a man underwater, uncomfortable in this world of sickness and suffering. His assistant walked beside him, listing statistics about the company's charitable contributions, but Julian barely listened. He just wanted this obligation finished. Then he heard laughter. Genuine, unrestrained, joyful laughter echoing from a room at the end of the hallway. He found himself walking toward it, drawn by the sound of life in a place filled with death. Through the doorway, he saw her. Nina Delgado was sprawled on the floor, her camera forgotten beside her, making exaggerated faces at a small girl who giggled from her wheelchair. Another child, an older boy with bandages covering half his face, was showing Nina his drawings. A teenager within 4 poles stood nearby, genuinely smiling as Nina declared each drawing a masterpiece worthy of a museum. Julian stood frozen in the doorway, watching this woman who should hate him, who had every reason to be bitter and angry, giving freely of herself to children who could offer nothing in return. She was radiant in a way he had never noticed before, her whole being focused entirely on bringing joy to others. "Excuse me," a gentle voice said behind him. Julian turned to find his grandmother in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse. Eleanor Ashford's eyes were bright despite her obvious illness. "Surprised to see me here, Julian?" He had not known. His assistant handled these details, kept his schedule clean of uncomfortable information. "Grandmother, what are you doing here? Why did you not tell me?" "Because you would have sent flowers and a check," she interrupted. "You would have delegated your concern like you delegate everything else that requires actual feeling." She gestured toward Nina. "That young woman comes here 3 times a week. No payment, no recognition, no agenda except bringing light into dark places. Do you even remember her name, Julian?" "Of course, Nina Delgado," he said stiffly. "Do you remember what you called her? What you made her feel like in front of everyone?" Julian was silent. His grandmother sighed, her disappointment heavy in the air between them. "Your parents would be heartbroken to see what you have become. They were kind people, Julian. They believed wealth was a responsibility, not a weapon. When did you forget that?" "They died when I was 12, he said quietly. "Maybe I never learned it in the first place." His grandmother reached out and took his hand. "Then perhaps it is time you did, before you waste what is left of your life being someone not worth knowing." The words echoed Nina's exactly. Julian felt something crack deeper inside him. That evening, he returned to the hospital alone. He found Nina in the common room, editing photographs on her laptop, surrounded by children's artwork. She looked up when he entered, and her expression hardened immediately. The children noticed her tension and moved protectively closer. "I am not here to cause trouble," Julian said quickly, his hands raised in peace. I just wanted to say, he stopped, the words catching in his throat. Wanted to say what, Mr. Ashford? That you are sorry? That you feel guilty? Nina's voice was tired rather than angry. Apologies are cheap. They do not pay my grandmother's medical bills or restore the contracts you destroyed. I know, he said. And I cannot undo what I did. But I saw you here today, saw what you are doing for these children, and I realized something. You have something I have spent my entire life trying to buy and failing to find. What is that? Meaning, he said simply. Purpose. You matter to these children. You change their lives. And I thought maybe, if you would let me, I could learn from that. Learn how to be someone worth knowing. Nina studied him for a long moment, searching his face for manipulation or mockery. She found only raw honesty and something that looked like desperate loneliness. The children are watching us, she said quietly. Whatever happens next, they see. So I will tell you the same thing I tell them. Actions matter more than words. Intentions mean nothing without follow-through. If you want to change, then change. But do not do it for me, and do not do it for your guilty conscience. Do it because it is right. Then teach me, Julian said. Show me how. The transformation did not happen overnight. It happened in small moments, in difficult choices, in the uncomfortable space between who Julian had been and who he might become. He started showing up at the hospital twice a week, at first hovering awkwardly in doorways, unsure how to interact with children who saw through his expensive clothes to the uncertain man beneath. Nina gave him simple tasks, organizing art supplies, reading stories, sitting quietly with children too sick to talk. She never made it easy on him, never offered praise for basic human decency. But slowly, something began to shift. Julian met 8-year-old Rosie, who had been in and out of treatment for leukemia for 3 years. She was obsessed with butterflies and could name every species in North America. He spent hours researching butterfly facts just to keep up with her conversations. He met 14-year-old Jamal, angry and scared about losing his leg to bone cancer, who needed someone to be angry with him rather than at him. Julian learned to sit with rage without trying to fix it, to let someone else's pain exist without making it about himself. He met dozens of children and families, each carrying impossible burdens with remarkable grace. One evening, Nina found Julian in the chapel, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. She almost left him alone. He was entitled to his private moments, but something made her stay. What happened? She asked quietly, sitting beside him. Rosie died this morning, he said, his voice broken. I brought her books about butterflies. We were going to build a butterfly garden in the hospital courtyard. She was so excited. And now she is just gone, and nothing I did mattered. It mattered to her, Nina said softly. In her last weeks, you gave her something to look forward to, something to dream about. That is not nothing, Julian. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. How do you do this? How do you keep coming back, keep caring, when it hurts this much? Because the alternative is worse, Nina replied. The alternative is letting fear keep you from connecting, from loving, from being human. Yes, it hurts. But the hurt means it mattered. The hurt means you are finally alive. Something broke open in Julian then. He told her about his parents, killed in a car accident when he was 12. About being raised by his grandmother and a succession of business mentors who taught him that emotion was weakness, that caring was liability, that the only thing that mattered was power and profit. About building walls so high and thick that he had forgotten there was supposed to be a person inside them. I do not know how to tear them down, he admitted. I do not even know if there is anything left inside worth saving. There is, Nina said with certainty. I have watched you with these children. I have seen you learn their names, remember their stories, sit with them in their pain. The walls are already cracking, Julian. You just have to be brave enough to let them fall. Over the following months, Julian's life became unrecognizable. He still ran Ashford Industries, still attended board meetings and made business decisions. But now he also knew the names of night shift nurses and the favorite ice cream flavors of children fighting for their lives. He established the Rosie Memorial Foundation, dedicated to funding pediatric cancer research and hospital comfort programs. But unlike his previous charitable efforts, this one was personal. He visited projects, met families, stayed involved. Nina became the foundation's creative director, using photography to tell the stories of children and families fighting impossible battles. Her work gave dignity to suffering, captured joy in dark places, and raised millions in donations from people moved by the humanity in her images. Working together, they discovered an unexpected partnership. Julian's business acumen and resources combined with Nina's creativity and compassion created something powerful, something that actually changed lives. But more than that, they changed each other. Julian learned to lead with empathy rather than ego. Nina learned that wealth was not inherently evil, it was simply a tool that could build bridges or walls depending on who wielded it. The moment everything truly shifted happened on a cold Tuesday evening. Julian's grandmother, Eleanor, had been declining rapidly. She asked to spend her final days at Mercy Children's Hospital, surrounded by the young lives she had worked to save through her charitable giving. Nina was photographing the children for their holiday cards when she saw Julian sitting beside his grandmother's bed, holding her frail hand. Eleanor's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "You found your way back to yourself. You became the man your parents always knew you could be." Julian's voice cracked. "I am sorry it took so long. I am sorry I wasted so many years." "No time is wasted if you learn from it," Eleanor said. "And you learned the most important lesson of all, that love is not weakness. It is the only thing that matters." She opened her eyes and looked past Julian to where Nina stood in the doorway. "Take care of him," she said to Nina. "He is finally worth knowing." Eleanor Ashford died peacefully that night, surrounded by the children she had helped save and the grandson she had helped redeem. At her memorial service, instead of the formal corporate affair Julian would have planned months earlier, they held a celebration at the hospital. Children painted butterflies in Rosie's memory. Families shared stories of Eleanor's quiet kindness. Nina's photographs lined the walls, capturing moments of love and courage. Julian stood before everyone and spoke from his heart for perhaps the first time in his life. "My grandmother taught me that wealth without compassion is poverty. That success without purpose is failure. That a life spent building walls instead of bridges is no life at all." He looked directly at Nina. "And a brave young woman taught me that it is never too late to tear down those walls, to become someone worth knowing, to finally come alive." Months later, Julian and Nina stood in the new butterfly garden they had built in Eleanor's memory. Children played among the flowers, chasing monarchs and swallowtails, their laughter bright against the spring sky. Nina photographed Julian surrounded by the children, his expression open and genuine, no trace of the cold man from the auction remaining. "You know," she said, lowering her camera, "if you had not been such an awful person that night, none of this would have happened." Julian smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "That is probably the worst argument for personal growth I have ever heard." Nina laughed. "I am just saying, sometimes the worst moments of our lives create the opportunity for the best transformations." He looked at the children, at the garden, at the life he had built from the ruins of his old one. "I am grateful for that night," he said quietly. "For you walking away. For you teaching me what it means to matter." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching butterflies dance between flowers, watching children discover joy, watching proof that people can change, that walls can fall, that even the coldest heart can learn to feel again. And Nina, ever the photographer, captured it all, not just the beauty of the moment, but the hard journey that made it possible, the courage required to become someone new. Because that was the real story worth telling. Not that a rich man found redemption, but that a human being found the strength to break open his own prison and finally, truly, magnificently, came alive.